welcome everybody. Nice to see you today. I have a very special guest up here with me, the amazing Lori Wilhite, my wife.
That's right, it's so good to get to be with you this weekend. I'm so excited to get to be able to share with my husband and to be able to talk about our topic today. We've been in a great series called Fresh Start. If you missed any of those messages, I encourage you to go check them out because they have been so good. But we've been looking at the financial side of our lives, and today we're going to be looking at generosity.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. And Lori has a very generous heart. Like, she's just a generous person. She loves to give gifts, especially. This is like a huge thing for her.
Yes, so like when you look at all of the love languages, my very number one is not quality time, it's not words of encouragement, it is gifts.
She's all about the gifts.
I love giving gifts, which I just feel like I need to tell my husband, you're so welcome. Like, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And because I love to give gifts. I'm the kind of person that like 6 months ahead of time, ahead of somebody's birthday or Christmas, I'm already like hunting for something. I'm thinking about it. What would they like? What would they appreciate? I think about it a lot because I feel like it communicates my love for them. It shows my heart for them. And so when we were looking around this week, we found this article that I thought was hilarious. It's the worst gifts to give your spouse. I'm about to help some of you out right now. All right, number 3, worst gift to give your spouse is a scale. Don't do this. Don't.
I mean, it's hard to even believe somebody would actually do this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's shocking. No, this is not what you want to communicate to your spouse. Number 2, worst gift you can give your spouse, a gym membership.
Same lane right there.
This too is going to get you in trouble. But here's the best one. Number 1, worst gift to give your spouse, a vacuum cleaner.
Now, Lori, really, I don't really understand this because, that's different. That's practical. You need that around the house.
You are
that can actually help.
No, you're only saying that because you did that. You got me.
Facts.
You got me a vacuum cleaner for my birthday.
Can you believe that? For real.
Yeah, you did.
Happy birthday, babe. We were young. We were in love.
And not smart. And
I've learned a lot since then.
Our floors were cleaner, but I was sad. And so let me just do like a favor for the people in the room to your spouses. We don't want a blender on our birthday, and we don't want a crock pot at Christmas, and we do not want a vacuum cleaner ever. Like, we don't want that as a gift.
And just a word of encouragement to those of you that feel like you're trapped forever with somebody who will never get this. I've learned a lot over the years, don't you think? I'm a little better.
So much better.
Yeah,
so much better.
Yeah, I'm a work in progress. We all are. So, gifts are one of the ways that we show our love for one another. And when you look at the Bible and spiritual maturity and growth, generosity and gifts to God are one of the ways that we show our love for God. In fact, look with me at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 7. This is what the Apostle Paul says about generosity. He says, God loves a person who gives, how? Cheerfully. Just hang out on that word for a minute. Cheerfully. So when it comes to generosity and giving, it's not supposed to be about sort of guilt and pressure and condemnation. It's supposed to be about joy and cheerfulness and worship, giving back to God as an act of worship. And God, now look at this, God will generously provide all you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. So there's a cycle to the generosity that we display in our lives. When we're generous with God, when we're generous with others, when we give back to Him, it opens up a door of God giving us more resources to take care of not only everything we need, we just read it together, but having more to share with others. This is what I always say to people. If you want more of God's blessings flowing to you, then you need to get God's blessings flowing through you.
Yeah, that's good.
In other words, you want God to bless you with more, get really good at being generous with the little He's already given you.
Right.
Let those blessings flow through you to others, and then you open the door for God to bless you with more. What Lori and I want to do with you today as we wrap up this whole series, we've talked about saving, we've talked about spending, we've looked at some biblical principles for managing resources, but for us in our family, the most important principle that we grabbed a hold of early on was this whole principle of generosity and giving back to God. I think it has had tremendous impact in every other area of our lives. So we want to share with you the top 3 reasons that Lori and I, over the last many years, have chosen to be generous, to give to the church, to give back to God, and to see Him move in our lives. We could be generous in a lot of ways, with our time, with our talent, but specifically, we're going to talk to you today about being generous with our money, back to the church and back to God, to see Him move and work in our lives. So let's talk a little bit about what we've learned over a few decades.
So the first reason why we give is because giving puts God first. Giving puts God first in our home, in our lives, in our spiritual lives, in our family. And so one of the things we love about generosity is it puts God first. Now, who are my leftover people? Like, you love a good leftover. You like leftovers after Thanksgiving. You like leftovers from the restaurant.
Look at that, Lori. There's like 7 people in the whole.
Like no
maybe I got 8 right down here. There's like nobody. Everybody.
Feel so vindicated in this moment. Judd and I feel very differently about leftovers. Judd grew up in a home where you cleaned your plate.
Come on, man. My mama was always like, people are starving all over the world. You better clean that plate. Don't you leave any food on that plate. Anybody grow up in a home like that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so I just grew up like, you got to eat everything. You got to clean the plate.
So Judd never even has the opportunity to bring home leftovers. I, however, always have leftovers, and I always have them box them up because I believe in my heart in that moment, I am going to eat these leftovers tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and I open my fridge, and I smell that food from yesterday. And I just am not excited about the cold, mushy situation that's happening in the fridge. But I don't have to worry about it because I am married to this guy who is going to eat those leftovers too. I
don't bring them home, but I'll eat whatever is in front of me, y'all. Come on.
That's right. This week he ate cold, mushy onion rings.
Yeah, onion rings. My daughter left some onion rings in there, and I was like, onion rings, yeah.
Our kids will even write on the containers they put in the fridge, Dad, do not eat this. It is mine. Like, don't take my food.
You got to claim it in our house. You got to claim it. It's right here.
So while leftovers are not my favorite, I actually believe God doesn't love our leftovers either. What God wants is our best and our first, not the leftovers that we would just want to bring to Him.
Yeah, it's interesting as you look through the biblical principle of generosity throughout the Bible, one of the biggest kind of points that you see God make with His people is that He wants the first, the very first. Yeah. And so you see it in passages like this, Proverbs 3:9. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to what? Overflowing. And your vats will brim over with new wine. Which I love this verse. I mean, we all want the second part of that verse. Yeah, man, I want my barns to be filled to overflowing. I don't even know what it means for my vats to brim over with new wine, but I'll take that too. That sounds awesome, right? We want the second part of that verse, and yet it hinges, I think, in part on the first part of that verse. Honor the Lord with your wealth. So how do you honor the Lord with the wealth? Well, what does He say? He says, bring the first fruits of all your crops. So it's an agricultural society back then. And the idea was this: when you have the first of your crops come through, you would go through and take the first of those crops and take your tithe, take 10% of what God has blessed you with, and you would take that and give it to the temple and give it as an act of worship back to God. And what's interesting is this was like a high risk kind of thing.
Yeah, it would have been very scary for families because you think about, what if the locusts come? What if a storm comes and wipes out the rest of my crop? How am I going to feed my family? So to take the very first of what you have and present it to the Lord when you don't have security for the rest of the year to feed your family was a massive act of trust and faith.
And I think the whole thing when it comes to generosity, what God's trying to teach us is trust.
Yeah.
What God's trying to teach us is putting Him first in our life and trusting Him. God doesn't need our money. He doesn't need our resources, but what He wants is our heart. And so the generosity is a way of saying, God, we trust you, we put you first, and we bring the first. A lot of us, I think when it comes to generosity, we sort of give out of whatever's left over, almost like it's the leftovers. But the challenge we see in the Bible is bring your first, bring your best, bring it by faith, bring it as an act of worship.
Right.
And so we've done that for our entire marriage. Even before we were married, we were doing that. I was doing that in my life. My parents actually lived this way, and Lori's parents too, which I think is kind of rare that we both came from families that were committed to tithing. They were committed to giving like 10% of their resources back to the local church to honor God and to worship Him in their lives. And so that's the homes that we came from. And we've done that and never regretted it over multiple decades, giving back to God in a consistent way. But I do think it's very important when it comes to bringing your first and your best to take the first. This is what we try to do. We try to take the first of what God gives us right off the top, as soon as we get paid, and we take that first 10% and we give it back to God because we can, because we're glad to do it. It's a joyful thing. It's not a guilt thing. It's a joy thing. We're glad and honored to be able to do that. But it's important that we do that with unity as a couple, because this can be a divisive issue.
It can be really hard.
Some of you right now are like, you're already ticking me off.
Well, finances is it's a contention in a lot of relationships and marriages. In fact, it's one of the top things that couples argue about. And so sometimes talking about generosity as a couple can just add more fuel to that fire, one more fight to have. And that should not be the case. Because again, this is about cheerful and joyful giving. And in the case of a couple, hopefully it's in unity together. And it's not just in unity as a couple, but in unity as a family. When we were raising our kids, they're grown up now, we have young adult kids, but when they were little, this is something we really tried to pour into them. I remember we had varying levels of success over the years with this, but when they were little and they had an allowance, we had buckets on their dresser, and one said save, and one said spend, and one said Jesus money, and they would take their little allowance and they would split it in the buckets, and then they would use that, and that worked really great until the week that I forgot to get cash to give them for their allowance, and then everything completely fell apart. It would just, it was good intentions that completely didn't make it.
We were talking about this, what did we do to try and teach these principles to our kids? How do we pass them on? And in the end, we were like, I don't know that we did anything very well and consistently except this.
Right, because, listen, I do think kids do what you do more than they do what you say. And so it's so important for us to be modeling these kinds of things in our homes, modeling generosity, talking about it, showing kids what a difference it can make in the lives of other people, how important it is for you and your family to be generous. And when they see that, just like we saw it in the homes that we grew up in, it becomes something that is important in their lives as well. And so, yes, do all the things and have the buckets and do the allowance, but also make sure that you just are displaying a heart of generosity in your home, because that is what your kids will follow through
and
on.
Do it with unity as a couple. I've had some people who've come to me over the years, more than one couple I've talked to. One of them really wants to tithe. They want to give back to God. The other one is very much not ready for that, and they're fighting about this, and it's tension. And I always say, hey, don't worry. The money side is secondary. You guys got to come together in unity. Right. And your spiritual life doesn't need to be the thing that divides you. You got to give each other time to get to a place of spiritual maturity where you can do this together in unity. That's where you want to be. And so otherwise, it just becomes this tension point, and in some ways it can do more harm than good. And we don't want that for you or for anybody else. But here's the thing. God does not need our money, right? God doesn't need our money. In fact, I don't believe God I don't think God uses giving to raise money. He uses giving to raise people. Right? He uses giving to raise people.
That's good.
It's our act of generosity, putting him first, taking the first 10% of what he gives us, offering it up to him as an act of worship, giving it back to him, and we're saying, God, I trust you first with this, and I believe not only you're going to bless the other 90%, you're going to take care of everything else in my life, you're going to work through my life, provide everything that we need so that we have enough and so that we can be generous. So giving, as you look through the Bible, it puts God first, and it's one of the reasons that we've not only tried to live it out in our lives, we've tried to teach our kids to live it out in their lives. We just believe it's very, very important. It puts God first. But not only that, giving is also the best investment.
Right. Giving is the best investment. I am a thrifter. I love a good thrift store. I love a good flea
Any thrifters
market.
Out there? Any thrifting people?
You guys are my people. I love it so much. And so I actually don't tell Jud I'm going thrifting. I tell him I'm going treasure hunting because it sounds so much fancier. And now that treasure may cost me 69 cents, but I am excited about it.
I do not understand.
Yeah, in fact, Jud, Wilhite, I thrifted this jacket. So, because that's what we do. We thrift things and wear them to church around here. And
She's always like, I'm saving you money. I'm saving you money. I'm like, well, not if you don't spend it at all. Anyway.
100%. I'm saving him so much money. I don't know that he believes that when I walk in with all my bags from Savers or something and I'm decorating our house, but I feel like it's an investment. I feel like I'm investing in things for our home or things to throw in my closet, because I love it that much. And as much as I think that's a great investment, they're actually in the spiritual side of our lives, there's something so much better when it comes to investments. Treasures that the Bible says we can store up, not here on earth, but in heaven.
That's right. Look at this passage, Jesus' words, Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Jesus says, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your what? Heart will be also. Now, I don't think Jesus is saying in his teaching that you can't enjoy nice things, you can't have things you care about. I don't think he's saying that at all. But I do think it's interesting that he's challenging us, and especially in this sentence where he says, where your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. I think we often think, well, my heart is the thing that's number one in my life. My heart is the core of who I am. The things that I love, I love with all my heart. But Jesus is actually saying, if you want to know some things about your heart, look at your bank statements.
Yeah.
Right? We read it together because he's like, where your treasure is, that's where your heart actually is also.
Right.
And it's a powerful challenge, for us to sort of step back. And again, I don't think Jesus is saying you can't enjoy your life. You should enjoy your life. Enjoy all the blessings God's given you. But remember that all of your earthly investments will one day come to nothing. They will fade away. You can't take it with you. The old saying's true. You and I, we have never seen, a hearse with a U-Haul behind it. You can't take it with you. And you say, well, I'm going to leave it for future generations. And to an extent, yeah, you can leave an inheritance for your kids or for your grandkids. And a certain amount of inheritance could be good for them. But a lot of inheritance usually ruins them. Hello, data, stats. So what you can do is send it on ahead. And you can take the generosity that God brings into your life and be generous back to him. And you store up treasures in heaven when you do that. You get an eternal reward when you do that. God does not forget your generosity, your kindness to others.
Right. That's right. That's right. And God can use it to make a huge difference in his kingdom and in the individual lives of people. About 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Thailand. I was working with trafficking victims there, and so we would go into the different clubs and talk to the girls and share Jesus with them. And so many of their stories went something like this. In that culture, in that country, the oldest girl is financially responsible for the family. She is to work, earn money, and send it back home to take care of her family. The problem is many of them are from rural, very poor areas, and they don't have an education, and they don't have any job skills. So they're sent to these big cities to earn money, but when they get there, they don't have the ability to get a job, and so they're very vulnerable and are taken advantage of. And so we had the opportunity to build a baking school in Thailand. And baking is an unusual thing. People don't have ovens in their homes. And so if you can learn the skill of baking, you have a very marketable skill. You can get a job at a hotel or a restaurant or maybe a coffee shop. And so we built this baking school, and it was awesome because girls could come, and whether they had been able to get out of the clubs or even if they were still in, they could come and take lessons on baking so that they could eventually be able to leave that and be able to get a job to support their families. It was very, very exciting, and what was really cool is it not only helped them physically in a moment, but it also helped them spiritually. Yes, they were getting job skills, but every time they came, they got to hear about a man who loved them, who would not hurt them, who would not abuse them, a man who died for them, and his name was Jesus.
That's right. And many of our Central family was part of that, helping fund that. And all of us, to some degree, were part of helping fund that.
That's right. In fact, just before Christmas, my friend was in Thailand. She was at the baking school. She sent me a video of showing me all of these girls that were there to learn how to bake. And she said, what we're doing right now is giving them help for today and hope for tomorrow. And that is the blessing that we get to have all the time right here at Central, is come alongside people and help, yes, with their physical needs, but also with their spiritual needs. We can give them help for today, but we can also give them hope for tomorrow. And when we're generous, what we get to do is pour into that in the lives of people, and God can use it not just to help them, but to give them hope for eternity.
Yeah, that's right. So we store up treasure in heaven through our generosity. It's the best investment. You don't have to worry about the stock market crashing. You don't have to worry about crypto flipping upside down. God will reward you, and you're storing up treasure in heaven. Here's a third reason why we and our family love to be generous, and that is giving brings joy. And we've seen this firsthand. Giving brings joy. There's a direct connection between joy and generosity. Now, I always say this too, not only in our personal lives. We've been around a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you the most joyful people we've ever been around are also some of the most generous. Right? When you think about people you've known in your life, isn't that true? The most joyful people are also the most generous. Not only people, some of the most joyful churches I've ever been a part of were also some of the most generous churches back to their community and to others. You know what I'm saying? There's a connection between joy and generosity in our lives. We've experienced that, and it's one of the reasons we love to be generous. I think it gives us tremendous joy.
Absolutely. And when you realize, or maybe you just sit and remember all that God has done in your life, in your family, in your kids, in your relationships, that it does give you joy to see God working in the hearts and lives of other people. Like, why do I get so excited when we see people getting baptized? And praise God, we get to see people baptized all the time here at Central. It's so amazing. But why do I get so happy about it? It's because every time I see somebody get baptized, I remember what God was doing in my heart and in my life when I made that decision. And it gives me absolute joy to think that we got to be a tiny part of somebody having that moment because we were able to give. Or why do we get so pumped up when somebody has like a victory in their lives, like in their recovery with whatever kind of addiction they have, because they've been going to celebrate recovery around here. We get excited about that because Jud knows exactly what that's like. He has been in that place. People. He has been in that place. He knows that experience. So it gives us great joy to know that the work that God did in his heart and life is happening in the hearts and lives of the people at Celebrate Recovery. And we got to be a tiny part of that. God has done such a work in the lives of our kiddos through the church, like an incredible work. So this Friday night, when we had kids from all of our locations show up here at Central Henderson, we had
like 1,300 kids.
1,300 kids here hearing about Jesus and how much he loves them, about his grace and mercy and forgiveness. I'm thrilled about that because I know the difference that's made in the hearts of our kids. And so I celebrate, and I'm so happy and joyful that God is moving the lives of those kids as well. And we got to be a tiny part of it because of our generosity. And it does bring us such joy in our lives.
That's right. And you think about the work that we're doing with Hope for the City, feeding people. Right. You think about all the work that's happening in the prisons with God Behind Bars. Yeah. I mean, there was a time where I think you could make the case that Christianity was really flat or maybe even in decline in the prisons across the U.S. And there were other religions that were really growing and taking off. And I feel like the work God Behind Bars has done, really, if you look at the Pando app, the hundreds of thousands of people that use it every single week inside prisons, because in many ways it's the only approved app they can use. Come on, somebody. I think Jesus is really moving powerfully in prisons, and the Christian faith is expanding rapidly in prisons. God Behind Bars is a big part of that.
Right.
We've gotten to be a big part of that, especially seeing that ministry birthed here and then seeing it go all over the world. Amazing. And God's using that. And that happened because people stepped up and felt compelled to give and to be generous to that ministry and to see it really take ground. It's an awesome, awesome thing. So I want to talk with you about some types of giving real quick. I'd like for you to just think about your life, maybe think about where you're at. This is why we've given over the last 28 years of marriage. It's why we love being generous. It's why we love giving here at Central and seeing lives change. And I think when we start the journey towards generosity, we often start with what we might call spontaneous giving. You just sort of like maybe you sponsor a kid through like Hope for Kids, or you hear about something going on and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do something to help that. I'm going to do something kind of one-off, spontaneous. I think that's where the generosity journey often starts. Then as we begin to grow a little bit spiritually, I think there's another category we kind of move to, which we might call generosity rockstar, but it's where we start giving in a more consistent, automated sort of basis and making a difference in a more consistent way financially in our life, being generous. Then I think we go up to another level of maturity where you start thinking about like percentage giving. You think about what God has given you in your life, and maybe you make a goal. I'm going to give, usually the goal is to get to like 10%, but you say, I'm going to give 5% or 7%, or this year we're going to, for me, we just sort of jumped in with 10%, and that's where we started, but everybody processes differently, and you go on that journey towards percentage giving. And then I think there's even a category above that, which is like sacrificial giving, where you say, look, I want to give above and beyond. And actually, Lori and I have lived at the level of sacrificial giving for many years. And we absolutely love it. Sacrificial giving says, look, we want to give 15%, 20%. I have a friend that his stated goal is to live on 10% of his income and give 90% of it away. Now, his 10% is more than most of us make in 100%. So, his 10, it's not like they're hurting. Come on, somebody. But here's the thing. He's very smart. He's an entrepreneur. He's very intelligent. And also, you kind of stand back and wonder, maybe part of the reason so much blessing is flowing to him is because he's allowing blessing to flow through him.
Right.
Think about where you're at in your life. No judgment. This is about giving cheerfully and joyfully as God blesses us. And then I want you to consider maybe moving up a level in your life. Like maybe you've been given spontaneously a few times to different things. What would it look like for you to just become a generosity rock star? Say, I'm going to give on a continual basis, a weekly basis, any amount. Look, think about it. We automate a lot of things in our lives, and a lot of us give automatically to Netflix every month, like $15. Come on, somebody, you know who you are. And even though we give to Netflix $15, like when it comes to the church and the work the church is doing, to Jesus, that the things are the most important in our life, we don't even think about that. You can go to Starbucks and get an $8 cup of coffee. You know who you are. And God bless you, and that's great. But then when it comes to like our faith, for some of us, like we've never contributed anything back to what God's really doing in the church community and people's lives. Think about that, pray about it, because this could be an opportunity to say, you know what, that's right. If God's first in my life, if Jesus is first, my money should reflect not just my love for Netflix, and I do love Netflix, but my love for Jesus. So, generosity rock star, moving on. Percentage giving. Maybe you've been a generosity rock star for a while, maybe even for years, and you've never taken that step to tithe. And I would just encourage you to pray about, like, what would it look like in your life to begin to take that step of really trusting God with the first 10% of what he's giving you. And then sacrificial giving. There are people in our church that God has blessed in a significant way. And you've got that money tied up in investments. You've got it tied up making money. You're saving for the future. You're saving for retirement. All those things are good. But the goal of our lives shouldn't be to be a bank. There comes a place where you realize I have enough. And if you love money, you'll never have enough. But you realize we have enough. And the best thing I can do now is to start releasing some of these resources, getting them untied and letting them help people now. Let them impact people now, because there are people on the street that desperately need it. And so I'd have you think about sacrificial giving. And I can tell you, for Lori and I, we realized a long time ago that the whole 10% thing for us wasn't going to be the ceiling. It was going to be the floor. And then from there, as we've grown to give more away, God has blessed us with more, and then we've tried to allow more to flow through us. And then as God has blessed us with more, we've tried to allow more to flow through us. That's the cycle of generosity, and Paul said it. God will give you everything you need, and he'll also give you what you need to be generous to others. So trust him, put him first. Think about where you're at. Pray about taking some steps in generosity. You want more of God's blessing to flow to you, then get God's blessings flowing through you in your life. Be generous back to him. And you can give to a lot of things. We can drop that now. You can give to a lot of things. Lori and I, we support a lot of different amazing ministries, missions, things all over the world. But we feel like our first and our best giving should be to our local church community. And we've done this even long before we were at Central. We've done it for our entire relationship, that our first and best should go back to God through the local church community that's transformed our lives, that's made such a difference in our lives. You pray about what you should do, but I've never regretted the step of generosity in our lives. What would you say, Lori?
No, absolutely. The truth is God has been so generous to us, most of all in his son.
Well, John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave. And the good news today is God doesn't need anything from us, but he wants our heart. In fact, when we surrender to him, we surrender our lives. People think, I don't know if I can give God my money. Listen, if you're a follower of Jesus, you gave God a lot more than your money. You gave him your whole life, your heart, everything, right? I mean, people get tied up on money. I'm like, oh, it's way worse than that. God wants everything, he wants your whole heart, your whole life. You give him your life. He's already given you everything in Jesus Christ, and he'll move and work and respond as you do. And I want to give some of you the opportunity today to realize that the greatest generosity is not the generosity you and I would generate. We're just responding to this incredibly generous God who's given us all that we need.